This week on London Real, we have Hacktivist Arjen Kamphuis.
If something in the crypto breaks, then it's all gone, and that'll be like a flash crash in literally minutes planet-wide. You allow a handful of countries to do industrial spying on an industrial scale all the time. It's not what the NSA can do, it's what the NSA knows. It's the information that they have about basically every major world history event since the early 60s. You don't catch terrorists by monitoring Facebook. Crypto-based, 100% peer-to-peer, 100% decentralized global currency, I think it has a big future.
Do you think Edward Snowden is a hero?
I think he's a hero in the sense that he very consciously made a choice to make his own life a hell of a lot more difficult for a greater good. So I think that's a pretty good definition.
London Real presents Arjen Kamphuis, Hacktivist.
Beautiful girlfriend, beautiful house in Hawaii. He was living in paradise. And he elected to dump all that, knowing full well that this was going to be the rest of his life.
Welcome back to London Real. I am here on location in beautiful Shoreditch, London. Always extremely colorful, with a little bit of street art or corporate art. It's hard to know which one it is. This week on the show we have Mr. Arjen Kamphuis, who is a hacktivist and expert in cryptography. And he was actually in London before we shot the episode for a crypto party that he hosted with Miss Annie Michon, who was on the show titled Whistleblower, and you might have known about her. She had some very interesting past with MI5. She was quite outspoken about the NSA and security before all of Edward Snowden revelations became apparent. But Arjen does a lot of things, and one of the big things he does is try to encourage you to think a bit more about cryptography. And I'm on the bandwagon as well. I'm going to soon be switching over to PGP encrypt all of my emails. He talks about when to use the Tor browser and when not to use it, and when not to get run over on the street. If you know what the Tor browser is, then you're probably in a good place. It's a browser that pretty much swaps all of the different IP addresses of its users in kind of a big random bag, so people can't tell where you're coming from. And it's something you want to use when you're concerned about your security. And something that Arjen says is that when he's logging into Facebook or places that already know his information, he doesn't bother with these types of cryptographic techniques. But when he's doing something where he's not necessarily identified, then he does. And it's something I think we all need to get familiar with. And you know, it's a reality now. We just have to face the facts that you either could be being watched or your information could be being recorded and used against you in the future. And it's good to have guys like Arjen on the show to instruct us with that. I also asked him point blank if Edward Snowden is a hero. I asked Andy the same thing. I personally don't think he is, but I also don't know what the hell that word hero means. And Arjen makes his case for why he thinks he is, and he made some great points as well. He also talked a bit about Bitcoin and what he thinks. You know, Arjen's a very intelligent guy. He knows his tech extremely well. He's a coder as well. So I think he brings a slightly different perspective on privacy than even our last week's guest, which was Rick Folkvinge. I hope I got that right. I've been butchering names on the continent lately, and I promise to stop as soon as possible. So that's coming up. I really hope you enjoy the show. He's the partner of Annie Michon, which we're big fans of on London Real. So if you like this show, go search hers. It's called Whistleblower, and it's a lot of fun. We're going to stroll by the Shoreditch Box Park, which is a bunch of boxes they stuck on top of each other for retail purposes. And check that out. But we got something coming up in the next few months, and it's going to be interesting. It's brought to you by Bulletproof, and these guys, yes, they sell the Bulletproof coffee, which I talk about, which is a wonderful product where you mix grass-fed butter, brain octane oil, and coffee in the morning that's free of mycotoxins, molds and toxins, and you drink. But they're actually just a really serious biohacking organization, and we're going to talk about hacking your sleep. And it's something that I don't think anyone is an expert in. and something that can affect your performance like nothing else can, not even nutrition. You listen, I was listening to the Mike Dolce show recently, and Dolce trains all the top UFC athletes. Hopefully he'll be on the show in a few months. And he trains Ronda Rousey and the Big Rig himself, who would be fighting for the title shot coming in March. And he says sleep is like the most important thing, he says, and then nutrition and then exercise. So I think it's a big thing, and we're going to be bringing you a few hacks and a few tips on basic things you can do to improve your sleep habits. So be keeping an eye out on that, and I'll be walking you through my sleep regimen. I'm also going to be tracking my sleep via iPhone at night. Oh, this is pretty cool. So you can check me out. I'll be talking about that and just trying to get some feedback loops to find out what's working, what's not working as far as what I'm eating and those kind of things. So hope you guys are looking forward to that. It should be a fun and a cool way to change things up a bit. Next week, we have Mr. Richard Viller coming on the show, who, as you might remember, is a doctor that sent in within 24 to 48 hours of a major international crisis, and he was just in the Philippines for that big ass typhoon that happened recently, and he came back and he sits down and talks to me all about it, and walks me through the basic triage operations, how he set up the hospitals, what kind of injuries he was dealing with, how many people that he was operating on every day. It was crazy. He's such a cool dude, such a gentleman. You can tell he's an ultimate professional, ex-SAS surgeon. Yeah, he's not only SAS, he was a surgeon in the SAS. So he'll be coming up next week, and I don't know, really looking forward to that. And that's it. I'm gonna leave you on that note. Definitely come check out this box park if you're feeling it in the future. Check out Shoreditch. It's always kind of happening around here. If you want to get involved in London Real in any way, please send me a message at brian@londonreal.tv. I just met with a guy today, Malik, who's going to be hooking us up with a bit of help with our daily grind and our weekly publication schedule. So please come and get involved. We should hopefully have some t-shirts breaking in the next quarter, and some more exciting things happening. So there you go. And finally, guess if you got anybody that you want to see me sitting opposite to and interviewing, then send me a message, or go ahead and contact them, and then hook us up via introduction. And now I'm going to leave you with cryptography experts and Bitcoin profiteur, I guess you would say, Mr. Arjen Kamphuis. Okay, here we go.
All right.
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. We are sponsored today by the folks at Bulletproof Coffee. We're also drinking the Bulletproof Coffee. If you don't know, it's a coffee that's free of molds and toxins. I mix it up with grass-fed butter and put in some brain octane oil, which is like the best of the coconut oil. I mix it up, and boom, there you go. It's almost like a meal replacement brew in the morning instead of my breakfast. And you've just had some. What do you think of the Bulletproof?
It's great. It's really. I'm not a big coffee drinker, but this is really, really good.
You were even anticipating it, right?
Oh no! I watched a few of your other shows on the YouTube channel, so apparently this was good. And I heard some other people that were on your show that I know and said it was really, really good. So
you came in almost expecting the Bulletproof.
Well, no, it's great that it was there, but yeah, it is actually very nice. So I might order me some.
Excellent. All right, very good. I just want to say thanks to those guys. They're kind of biohackers originally, and so they're always looking for better ways of doing things. So they'll be having more things coming up. Actually, I just started monitoring my sleep at night, and they do a lot of things with heart monitoring, with like meditation. So more to come from the Bulletproof executive. That's Dave Asprey, and they're my man over there, Zach Garcia, their marketing director. So more stuff to come. If you want to buy their products, go to upgradedself.com and pick up a bag, pick up some oil, all that good stuff. My guest today is Mr. Arjen Kamphuis, who is the co-founder and CTO of Gendo. Is that pronounced right?
Yeah.
Which is a management consulting company that specializes in technological innovation. And I believe that you advise people on strategic impacts of new technology. I think you've got a lot to say about cryptography, copyright law, government IT policies, maybe even Edward Snowden, Bitcoin. Jesus, we got a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
Welcome to London Real.
It's great to be here.
Thanks for being here. You, along with two other people, send me emails with the PGP encoding. It's you, it's Annie Michon, our former guest, who is your partner as well. And I just had Rick, I'm messing his name up, Falkvinge, the head of the Pirate Party.
Founder of the Pirate Party,
Yeah, so you three are the only ones that are sending me messages on PGP. I keep thinking I need to get with the program and do it myself. You were hosting and spoke at the Crypto Festival here in London yesterday, which I think was all about getting on board with cryptography. Can you tell me what was going on yesterday? What were some of the things you talked about? And then what should I be doing when it comes to just basic security?
Right. Okay, so there has been a phenomenon going on for the last year and a half. It's called crypto parties, which basically where experts in information technology, information security, crypto tech get together with people who are interested but not yet, capable of using it or understanding all the details, and basically spend a couple of hours or a day, as in yesterday, to teach and to also get feedback on, what's easy to use, what's difficult to use, what do we need to improve. So it's a back and forth between experts and non-experts, and trying to get everybody to a higher level in using technology that can safeguard your communication and safeguard your anonymity when you do stuff online, whether it's sending email or web browsing, or there's a whole range of activities. And there's a whole range of technologies that can safeguard your privacy. And regrettably, this is not taught in schools, which is really sad and strange and a massive failure of education. So many individuals have basically taken it on themselves to say, well, if the government isn't going to do it, then we'll just get started, and we'll just start in living rooms and little cafe corners, or we'll start wherever we can. And then yesterday there was a big gathering. Usually these gatherings are literally like a dozen people. It's like a Tupperware party with more laptops, basically.
They sound like fun, man.
It is fun. It's great. Okay. It's great. It's very informal. It's all non-profit. Nobody gets paid for anything. It's just something you do because you think it's important. So we had a crypto party before the summer in June. And there I met somebody from Goldsmiths University, and he was very enthusiastic, and he said, we need to pick this up a notch. And he then went to work, found some other people, and they created this one-day festival. And without any budget, I think he said yesterday that in total they spent like £80 or something, but 500 people showed up.
That was yesterday?
That was yesterday,
okay,
on their free Saturday, to learn, talk about information security, privacy, and then everything that is connected to that.
Wow. I really wanted to come. I apologize. I shot a Silicon Reel episode with Friday, and then Max Kaiser was in the house, and I was trying to get it in the can. But my girlfriend wants to come. Everyone I talk about, they kind of want to know what's going on with these things. And I've started using the Tor browser a little bit. I might or might not have used the Silk Road in the past to transact. No comment there. But I don't really know some of the basic stuff I should be doing. And for the people that are listening that know nothing about what you're talking about, are there just some basic steps that you think people should use, for just basic security?
Yeah. A few basic things. I think having at least a Tor browser installed, along other things, on your laptop, so that you can sometimes maybe use something else. If you're logging into your Facebook account or something, you're not going to have privacy anyway. So use whatever browser you like. But then maybe you want to go to some news sites that are a bit more edgy, and not necessarily you want your internet provider, your government, or your employer to know what sites you're looking at, what news you're reading. Use a Tor browser for that.
And for people that don't know, what is the Tor browser? If you had to explain it, in a minute.
It's basically a clone of an existing web browser, which is Firefox, but it has some extra bits in there that make sure that your internet traffic between your laptop or computer and the web server that you're looking at, that you're communicating with, is routed through several other computers over the internet in a very random, non-geographic specific pattern. And that makes it impossible for the web server on the other side to see that you are you. So see that you are surfing from a certain type of computer, from a certain IP address in London, which can ultimately be connected maybe to your identity. And the Tor browser will reroute the traffic literally across the entire planet over 3 different steps that don't even all know each other where they are. So there's several layers between you and basically the outer world, and that keeps your privacy fairly secure. Unless you start logging into something, then of course you're giving away. So the technology does a lot, but it also requires you to behave in a certain way. And that's the important part where I think a crypto party really adds value, is not only do we help people install the software, but because you need to set it up properly, and sometimes it's a bit finicky. But the other thing is, all the tools also come with certain sets of behaviors. And those are just as important as the tech itself. So the Tor browser, when used incorrectly, it doesn't give you anonymity at all. But now, if you think it does, you have a false sense of security, which is even worse than having no security at all, right?
Okay, what's an example of it not giving you the security?
So if you would use the Tor browser, but then you log in under your real name and with your real passport into whether it's Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter or any sort of that kind of online service that is fully NSA monitored. Now, of course, even though your traffic goes through the 3 different countries and your IP address isn't known, but you're still telling the person on the other side, okay, this is me, I just logged in with my password. So you have identified yourself.
Right.
So then, the technical stuff is still trying to keep you anonymous, but you've just basically given away the game. And so this is with many things, with these privacy-enhancing technologies, that you need the tech set up properly, which isn't always as user-friendly as it should be. I mean, this is still a work in progress. But the other thing is, it does require a little bit of discipline, or just knowing what to do, basically. And so it's those combination of things that where, a bunch of people getting together at a crypto party, or as yesterday at a festival where it's a whole day thing with parallel tracks, 500 people coming to learn. That's the kind of knowledge that gets exchanged there. And many more people should be using all this stuff. To have some privacy when you choose, when you feel that's important. And I think everybody has something that they might not want to share with the entire planet or with 4.5 million Americans with a security clearance. So,
is that how many Americans have a security clearance?
Well, nobody knows the exact numbers,
okay.
But that's sort of, it's indicative. Of course, the other big problem there is we now know, because of Mr. Snowden, that external contractors, not working for the US government, but working for a private company, have full access to the most intimate US security government documents.
Right, because he was working for Booz.
He was Booz Allen Hamilton as an external consultant working in Hawaii, having access as a systems administrator, so it doesn't get more access than that usually, having access to all these documents that, and thank God for it, because now we have the info. But the wider implication, of course, is that who else is in there? And this guy elected to use his access to inform the world. But maybe there are a dozen other people in there who say, hey, I could make a little side money by selling this. And maybe they get approached by the Chinese government or, a big drug cartel. Because if I were a big drugs cartel and I need information and I have literally, a hangar full of suitcases of cash, so cash is not my problem, why would I build my own spy infrastructure if I can just take a few of those suitcases, give them to somebody, and then they will give me the keys to the kingdom of the US global information infrastructure.
Right.
That sounds a pretty good deal.
What do you say to the classic argument that someone says, Arjen, I have nothing to hide. I'm not doing anything illegal, so I don't need to encrypt my passwords. I don't need to hide what I'm doing to the world. What do you say to that?
Well, I mean, my first response now is always, really, your life cannot be that boring. I mean, and if it is, I truly pity you. But the broader issue is, of course, and the second thing is I'm not doing anything wrong. Well, what's wrong and what's not is a shifting thing. So we've had periods in fairly recent, history in Europe where it was wrong to hide your Jewish neighbors, or it was wrong to listen to BBC radio. In the 40s in the Netherlands, if you had a radio, you could be shot. So the fact that you're doing something wrong today and maybe 15 years down the line, it's retroactively considered wrong. So the problem is nobody knows what the future is going to be. And so right there, I think, is a reason to at least have the option of dialing it up and down when you're doing something. But I think that is still a very individualistic viewpoint of sort of the broader issue. And I think the much broader issue is that even if you truly have such a sad life that you'll want to share every bit of it with everybody all the time without having control, then okay, that's your prerogative. But the broader issue is maybe 2 years from now you'll need a lawyer because you have been falsely accused because the police screwed up something horribly. Now you want to have a confidential discussion with that lawyer at some point. And so the lawyer needs to be able to have secure communications with you, or your doctor, or the teacher of your children, or the politician who hopefully maybe is working on your behalf, or the journalist who is exposing something that your government or a big corporation do. So it's not necessarily about every individual in society, but it is about how we organize this sort of stuff in society. So, most people are not hardcore activists or human rights lawyers or doctors, but they do need to have all those other people in society to have that privacy and to have the ability to shield some information from, whether it's the government or big corporations, so that thereby all of society gets actually to be, a much nicer place to live. And historically, when especially governments and nation states go bad, privacy tends to be one of the first things to go.
Right. It's funny because we haven't had a recent experience of that. So you talk about, say, the Nazi Party, or you talk about McCarthyism in America in the 50s. Where,
or the Stasi in former East Germany.
Right,
fairly recent.
It's 80s, right?
Yeah,
that's 80s.
This is up to 89.
Right, where like really you were dangerous. You could be killed for things that you're saying to your neighbors.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the Western world or the American world doesn't remember that, and they don't realize that when things do get bad, that's one of the first things that goes out the window. So,
well, of course, now we have in the entire world, certainly in the entire West, but in the entire world, a situation where if somebody in the U.S. security apparatus is of the opinion that you might be involved in terrorism, no actual proof or no actual deed required, you can be rendered globally to anywhere, and anything can be done to you.
Right.
And this has been done to people, German citizens, Italian citizens, British citizens, who were completely innocent, but mistaken identity. So they get literally snagged off the street and they wake up 2 days later and they're in Kazakhstan in some CIA black site. And then 3 years later, after lots of torture, somebody figures out, oops, mistaken identity. So
it's really happening.
Again, the idea that, I'm not doing anything wrong this week, so therefore I am ultimately safe. I wish it was true, but regrettably we're not there anymore.
Right. There was a 60 Minutes show recently, and they went down to Guantanamo Bay, and they had all the people that are being held there, and I see how these people are potentially had some horrendous crimes. I was in New York City for 9/11. It was a horrible time, but they're being held without trial, and they're being held without trial for 12 years. Yeah. And so it's like, okay, this is America, and you don't get a trial. And it was just like, it's just hard to comprehend that these things that you assume the Western gives you access to that cannot exist, not to mention the rendering and the different things that can happen.
Most of the people, my understanding is that most of the people there isn't even very concrete evidence against them of what specifically they are supposed to have done. If you start handing out cash bonuses in a tribal area for handing over terrorists, then suddenly everybody who has a naughty neighbor will hand over that naughty neighbor, get $5,000 in cash, which, if you're a Pakistani or an Afghani, that's several years' salary, right?
Right.
That's a lot of money. So now all kinds of little local disputes get settled by handing over 19-year-olds to the U.S. security apparatus, who then does God knows what to them. So, I think this whole thing went wildly off the rails. Okay. Wildly off the rails.
I want to ask you something that I asked Annie when she was here, your partner, Annie Michon, and this is about Edward Snowden. Now, I asked her if Edward was a hero. Snowden was a hero. I want to get your opinion. I don't think he's a hero, but I don't really know what that word hero means, because it's a very strange word. Yeah. You could argue that no one's a hero. Even the heroes, once they're told they're heroes, they hate that term. But do you think Edward Snowden is a hero?
I think he's a hero in the sense that he very consciously made a choice to make his own life a hell of a lot more difficult for a greater good. So I think that's a pretty good definition. He had a wonderful life, a wonderful job, a salary that most people will never reach before the age of 30, beautiful girlfriend, beautiful house in Hawaii. He was living in paradise in every conceivable metric that most ordinary people would have of what paradise would be. And he elected to dump all that, knowing full well that this was going to be the rest of his life. The rest of his life was going to be difficult because of this. And he elected to do that instead of just, keeping his mouth shut and keeping his head down and just continuing on his job. So yes, I think in that sense, he is very much a hero. Also, he's not very actively seeking a lot of publicity about himself, because as he's always said, and I completely agree there, it's not about him, it's about the information. And we should be paying attention to and trying to understand, all the documents and all the information that come out and the implications of all that information. So while we should certainly, I think, thank him and maybe honor him in some way, but ultimately it's not about him. It's about the info that he has given us, and now it's up to everybody else to make sure that, you know, his efforts and the risks that he's been taking and still taking were not for nothing. And so, you know, at least we should read all we can and try to understand and maybe do something else. You know, maybe say, okay, I'm going to make life a little bit more difficult. If people want to listen to me, okay, I'm going to be using some of the crypto stuff. You know, as a very minimal first step, I'm going to spend the 2 hours it takes to understand some of the basics, to set it up on my computer, and to start using it a little bit. And I will encrypt my email, you know, not because I am doing something very dangerous or something illegal, or I'm an activist or super journalist living at the bleeding edge, but merely because if I send more encrypted emails and everybody else starts doing it, then the people who really need it will be able to hide better in the crowd.
Right.
So merely by, for instance, encrypting your email, you're helping the next Edward Snowden and the next Glenn Greenwald or the next whatever other activist to be better at their job and to do these things.
How much more information do you think that Edward Snowden has to reveal? Do you think it's just the tip of the iceberg?
Oh, absolutely. This is just the hors d'oeuvres, what we're getting now.
Like 10%, do you think?
Oh, no, yeah, not much less than that.
Really?
There are tens of thousands of documents. We've only had like, what, 200?
He's quite a very good poker player or a chess player. I mean, a lot of people would just be like, here it all is.
Yeah, no.
But he's being very strategic
No,
about...
I think he has thought through very well what he was doing. And I don't agree with everything that Glenn Greenwald does. But I do think, given where most of the world was in thinking about these matters, it's good to sort of start slow and basically, you know, get everybody in a mental place where they have now heard a couple of things over the last half year, and they're slowly getting in a mental place where you can get some of the big stuff.
It is intelligent that they've dripped it out, because I think all at once you might have, you know, as humans, we pick up on one big thing or one big thing, but, you know, the slow leak has helped. Yeah. Greenwald, what do you think he brought attention to certain things and should have brought attention less to other things, or?
I'm not sure, because I don't know what's in the other documents, okay. Obviously. I also think that when you have such a document, even if the document is maybe only 2 pages of text or 5 pages of text, actually analyzing it, understanding it, and being able to understand its context and its implications, that can be a lot of work. That can literally mean days and weeks of work. So I think if he does 2 documents a week, he's probably working very, very hard with a small team of people that he can trust. So I'm not sure if you could do it faster. I can't really judge whether, you know, what his priorities are and if he got them right, because I don't know what else is in there. I am mostly curious myself very much, not about, also about the capabilities, which mostly what we see now is the capabilities of the NSA. What are they capable of doing from a technical perspective? How many people can they tap? How many fiber optics can they follow? Stuff like that, which has already been completely shocking for most people anyway. I think certainly people in info security circles suspected many of this, but it was never provable, and now it's provable.
Right.
But I think the much more juicy bits, which I hope will come, is not what the NSA can do, it's what the NSA knows. It's the information that they have about basically every major world history event since the early 60s.
Okay.
Right.
So you would like a little more focus from Glenn Greenwald on what they know as opposed to the capabilities?
Well, maybe there are much more spectacular capabilities that we haven't heard about, and I would certainly want to know. But I think the much more socially impactful stories in the end will be about what the NSA knows about, you know, basically the second half of the 20th century and the first decade of this century that we haven't been told yet.
Okay, kind of like the WikiLeaks info was interesting because you got to hear what was going on.
Yeah, but this could go much, much further, because this, you know, could be way above top secret. Now, I don't know what's in the other tens of thousands of documents, because I haven't been told. But if any of that stuff is in there, that would be real fireworks. If we have to massively really rewrite 20th century history about who started what war and who knew what when, you know, a whole series of wars started. What was really going on around, you know, you can start at Tonkin Gulf and go all the way to the most recent wars in Iraq and all the stuff in between. Yeah, I mean, that could be political firework.
Definitely, definitely. You know, Annie said that she started getting phone calls when the Snowden news came out, but she had been talking about this stuff for years. And I was wondering if the same was with you. You know, is this when Snowden happened? Did it just put a lot of attention on you for talking about these pieces? And what surprised you about what he came out with? Those are 2 questions.
Well, I'll take last first. I was surprised although not completely, somewhat surprised about the scale of things, basically. And the fact that the question of what are we actually achieving here by doing all this doesn't seem to be a question that anybody within the NSA is really interested in. They just say, let's have it all, and then we'll figure out a use afterward.
Right.
Which is just, I think, a horrible way of doing things.
That was their stated mission statement, wasn't it?
Yeah,
just grab it all.
Just grab it all. Right. Which is so far away from any sort of reasonable way such an institute should be behaving under a nominal democracy that it's just quite unbelievable. Right. I found it most unbelievable how unashamed they were about that, basically. So that there is no limit to what they are willing to do, even if there is also no justification for it.
Right.
Because there's no proof that this makes anybody safer or makes the world a better place in any way, shape, or form. You don't catch terrorists by monitoring Facebook. Terrorists don't do their work on Facebook. You know, the clever ones who are really dangerous, who are capable of doing massive, complex operations globally, they don't work over Facebook. So if you're doing that, then there's something, well, we'll get to that later. The other thing is, I don't think it drew a lot of attention to me personally. I worked in the Netherlands several years on developing IT policies with the idea that, okay, we are running our entire society on software that we don't know how it works under the hood. You know, it does something for us, like word processing, but maybe it does other stuff, there's no way to know. And we now run our entire society on it. You know, every second that a major city functions, it's because all these computers are doing just everything right. But the software is under control essentially by a foreign private party or a foreign power, as we now know. And so this I saw, you know, over a decade ago as a very fundamental problem. It was very hard to explain. We got some traction also because of the cost of the software. And then in 2007, it made it into policy in the Netherlands. This is something I worked on for several years. And then that policy basically was killed by massive political pressure from outside. Because, of course, the Netherlands stopping to buy billions of euros worth of US software, that couldn't be allowed to happen, basically. And yes, one of the reasons that we always stated for wanting that policy was not just to save billions of euros, but also to say, look, if our society is going to be running on computers and we want to live in a democratic society, then it follows logically that our elected representatives need, at least in potential, to have some insight into what these machines are doing. Now, not that they all become programmers personally, but there need to be some mechanism where somebody that I can trust within my country, or whether my country is the Netherlands or Germany or the EU, but not, you know, outside that sphere where I have some political influence. At that level, there needs to be technical oversight, the possibility for technical oversight. And if that isn't there, then basically we've just handed somebody else control over our society. So we shouldn't do that.
Okay. You know, right now we're seeing companies push back. So for a long time, you know, the Googles of the world and the Twitters and the Facebooks were like, you know, we don't give information away. And then it's found that they did give the information away. And now everyone's coming up with a new crypto way of keeping the information away from the NSA.
Yeah.
Twitter has a new protocol. I forgot what it was called. And how much of that is window dressing, and how much of that?
It's all entirely window dressing.
Okay, because they're trying to get credibility with their users and their shareholders, right? But you're not buying it.
So they've been basically mostly misinforming them for, you know, a decade or more, possibly 20 years. And now they see the potential marketing fallout of all this and the loss of trust. And so now they're trying to, you know, say, oh, no, we're going to do more crypto and two-factor authentication and lots of technical terms. But there is nothing that Twitter can do, or Google, or Facebook, or Microsoft, or Apple, or any of those companies, or Sony if they have a US subsidiary. There's nothing any of those companies can do that if the NSA calls them with a national security letter and say, we want all the information from this person, this IP address, this country, they have to hand it over. It doesn't matter, you know, whether they want to or not. That's just how the Patriot Act works. There is no choice. So I'm not even that interested in blaming, you know, a certain individual working at a certain company. Some of them actually received money to basically betray us, so that's not so nice. But the biggest problem is basically the US government, who just wants it all, as the NSA says, and is therefore willing to destroy everything in the process, including the trust that, you know, the 95% of us on this planet who are not US citizens can have in these American companies. So when then, you know, some general says, oh, this is all not a problem, he tells the US Congress, because it's just about foreigners. Then, of course, the 95% of us who are foreigners on this planet say, okay, well, that's obvious. So obviously we cannot trust your companies anymore. Even though they may actually be providing beautiful tools, good software, nice systems or services or whatever. But you are telling us directly that we can no longer trust them for the foreseeable future. So even though maybe, Google services are really convenient and actually technically not that bad, we can't trust them. So we need to figure out something else. And even if that means extra cost or inconvenience, too bad. We need to move.
Okay, so you think even these new pieces like the double authentication, it doesn't make a difference because they can still get subpoenaed by the NSA. No. It's not like the NSA can collect all the information as easily, but you're saying they can still get whatever they want.
No. It doesn't make a difference for the NSA because they just literally imagine there's like a building, and on the front door we now make a much bigger front door and a moat and a drawbridge, right? But the problem is the NSA never goes through the front door. They always go through the back door, and that's still open. By law, it's open.
Okay.
So there is literally no difference at all.
Right. And that's what they found because they weren't even, they were right in the back door. They were checking the cables on the transatlantic pieces and just monitoring the unencrypted information. Do you see this changing anytime? I mean, I speak to Americans and most of them are like, Most of them are kind of like, they don't seem to be amassing any kind of a change for this. Do you see that changing?
I'm hoping it will change. I think that if Europe, large chunks of Asia, Latin America stop buying US IT, software products or services, and we're talking about tens, possibly hundreds of billions of dollars on a yearly basis here, that's got to hurt somebody. So now some of the massive lobbying power of the big US IT companies, product or services, is now going to hopefully maybe be directed at the Congress to say, hey, stop this stuff, shut down the NSA or neuter them or do something, because we're getting killed here in the global market.
Right.
So Germany has just announced that they will essentially now base their information technology future, whether it's for their governments or for their big industrial infrastructures, they're going to do it themselves because they simply say we no longer can trust this stuff. And this is too important. And we happen to be actually a fairly good engineering country, so let's take all the money we used to give to America for software and stuff, and let's just hire programmers, and we're going to just do it ourselves.
I know both you and Annie have Switzerland.ch websites.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering, what are some of the basic things that you stay away from on a regular basis? Do you stay off of Google browsers? Do you stay away from Gmail? Are there certain things that you just won't touch? And use other things?
I use many of those. I put start page between me and Google, for instance, when I search. It's a little thing that anybody can do.
What is it? A
start page. It's basically an alternative search engine.
Okay.
Except it uses part of the Google infrastructure, so it's a much smaller organization, and they basically sit between you and Google. Okay. So Google says there's a question from the start page server, but they don't see it's from you. So it's not from your individual computer and your individual IP address. There's a little something that many people can do so that Google doesn't have, 2 decades from now, 30 years worth of your searches, which point back to you as an individual.
Okay.
I use many things. For instance, I've used Facebook because in some Dutch educational schools where I teach, universities, colleges, they actually use that as a student platform. So, which in itself I find horrible, but I can't change that in the short term. So I will use Facebook to the absolute minimal, but I have an account on it, and I don't want somebody else making an account under my name. So right. I made a defensive account fairly early, then didn't touch it for years. Then basically, because I want to do guest lectures here and there, you have to use it at least minimally. But I keep the browser that I use for that, I keep that away from my normal work. So I have several browsers on my laptop. One is the Tor browser. One is Firefox, which I dress up with lots of privacy-enhancing plugins, which makes it a bit heavier and slower, but it's a price I'm willing to pay. And then I have a third browser for things like Facebook and Twitter, where because I'm logged in, I have no expectation of privacy anyway, and I accept that for that little corner of my laptop, but I keep it separate from all the other stuff.
Okay.
So that way I think I can still have a reasonable level of privacy in the sense that I can keep some of my other surfing behavior away from, being tracked by Facebook and those companies.
Okay. We saw the German chancellor come out recently, and she's shocked and appalled that her mobile phone is being monitored by the NSA. When the WikiLeaks information came out, you found that in the embassy in Moscow, they were talking all this rubbish about the premier, or you found out in Egypt that they were saying that this guy's insane, and all of these things. And now it turns out the U.S., when they're in Toronto, are spying on the G20 people. But isn't this diplomacy 101? I mean, from the days of the Romans, everyone is constantly spying on other people. Is a certain amount of this just a part of doing business? I mean, when Merkel, is she really mad, or is she just she just have to come out and say this is ridiculous? I mean, isn't everyone always spying on everyone else?
I'm sure that part of the anger was for domestic consumption, as we say.
Okay, right.
But on the other hand, it was very weird that Merkel's phone was already tapped 4 years before she became the chancellor. So she was a up-and-coming politician in opposition, merely an elected member of parliament, not in the government, and already they were tapping her phone. And from that you can infer that probably every politician in the world who is seen as having potential, so maybe in 10 years there will be somebody. So now the US starts tapping their phone today, because then 10 years down the line you have a dossier going back a decade. Now, that is pretty far beyond sort of, the reasonable, okay, we want to have some intelligence about what everybody's doing. I suspect actually that the vast majority, because, Angela Merkel was never a terrorist or in any way, shape or form a threat to US national security. So doing it at this level and at that scale and over that time period is just way, way, way beyond the pale. And it's not about security matters. This is about trade negotiations. This is about industrial espionage. This is about being able to manipulate your so-called allies who actually, apparently you aren't that allied with. So I think the vast majority of the spying that institutions like the NSA do have nothing to do with so-called national security, which is, one of those famously completely undefined terms like the war on terror.
Right.
Where neither war on or terror is defined, so that's sort of like that. So why do you tap Facebook and Gmail and all that stuff? This is not about fighting terrorists. This is about industrial espionage, number one. This is about figuring out what British Aerospace is doing in Airbus, so you can get the information to Boeing, so they can make a better offer to the Chinese and get the $20 billion contract. That's I think the chief purpose of this. And then the secondary purpose is repressing democratic resistance in particularly Western societies. I mean, in other societies, you can do it in other ways, a bit more brutal and a bit more direct. And in the West, of course, if there's a democratic opposition to something, you can't just shoot those people. That would look bad on television, so you don't do that. So what you do is you infiltrate the groups. And of course, that's much easier if you know exactly who's in the group, what they think about each other, where they are physically, where they hang out, all that information. So all the activists who organize their little things over Facebook, they get infiltrated just all the way up to their eyebrows, and especially if they're doing something that actually matters.
Right.
And that's also what it's for. It's all the spying.
Powerful tool if you think about it. If you know what Merkel's saying on her mobile phone, and you can manipulate the whole situation. It's funny because I worked in the city of London for 9 years as a trader in the banking industry, and all of our lines are recorded. They have been since I was working in that business 20 years ago. And you call it going to the tapes. And it's never a nice thing if you have to go to the tapes, because you have to pull and find out exactly what you said. If you said buy or sell, or say you quoted a number at a certain price, and you have to go back. But you're constantly aware that everything you're saying is being recorded. So you just develop an intelligence where you don't say some things on recorded lines, because you know that potentially it could get pulled. So you get this awareness about you. So in a weird way, I'm kind of a little bit more aware, because most people just don't think twice when it comes to what's going to say. I bet even one of Merkel's aides would call and say, blah, 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 Obama, right before her meeting with them, and say, remember, push him on this because he's having a hard time at home. And Obama having that information completely can structure his argument.
This is what it's for. And I think the fact that actually in the West so many people have complete faith in, the morality of their governments into an unknown future is sort of a testament to actually the success of sort of the whole Western project. The fact that we are now in a place where most citizens literally cannot conceive that their governments would ever go bad, that's in itself, it's sort of a big achievement. But now it's becoming our major weak point, really, when some of the governments do go bad, more or less, that we can't respond adequately anymore, and we require a level of evidence first that when that happens, things have already gone completely off the rails. So on the one hand, it's actually a testament to how nice a place Europe is, that most of the Europeans are completely naive about these sorts of things.
Right, even though this was one of the most oppressed continents for a very long time.
Yeah, but so for the last half century plus, it's been a pretty good place to live.
Yeah, it's been happy. It's been a happy place.
But so maybe we've unlearned a little bit how bad the world can really be, and we need to relearn it a little bit.
Yeah. No, I think that's true all around, definitely. Let me get your opinion on a hot topic lately, which is our old friend Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. It's just pushed through $1,000 a coin now. It seems to be continually on the rise. You have a lot of knowledge when it comes to technology, cryptography, that kind of thing. What are your general thoughts on Bitcoin? Is it here to stay? Is the value going up? Is it going to be a factor in the next few years?
If the crypto of it doesn't get broken, which somebody might find a fault in the design, that's possible.
Because if that happens, it goes to zero.
If that happens, it just boom, it goes away. Right. Then if it turns out that you can fake the transaction log or something, if something in the crypto breaks, then it's all gone, and that'll be like a flash crash in literally minutes planet-wide. Because if one person figures it out, then the whole thing. I
don't think people have a concept of buying something and have it completely be worthless. I don't think people.
It's not unlike paper money. Paper money is in itself worthless as well. It's just a collective faith that we have in it, and we've now scaled it up so big, multinational, that people literally don't think about it anymore. But again, I get a little piece of paper, it says 50 euros, it's printed by the European Central Bank. There's nothing there. It's literally just a piece of paper. It's a very beautiful piece of paper, and a lot of printing technology went into it. Yeah. But it's nothing there. It's not redeemable for gold or anything like that.
It's just a promise to pay.
It's just a promise that I can give this to somebody, and then that person will give me goods or services, and then he will give it to somebody else, and rinse and repeat. As long as everybody believes it, it works fine. And if there turns out that, we're printing too much of these things, then at some point people are going to say, well, I'd like to have something else, please. I prefer a little lump of gold instead of your 4,000 euros, which are basically just toilet paper. So that can happen with Bitcoin, but a lot of people are now, of course, looking into it. Nobody's found a fault yet. So it appears to be a very, very solid design, made up by one or more very, very capable people. I mean, really top-notch programming.
Yeah, you're impressed with the tech?
From as far as I can understand it, and I'm not a mathematician, but I can look a little bit at some of the stuff. And yes, it is impressive. It's very well thought through. Particularly the fact where there is no centralized point of failure anywhere. So this is the central design feature, that there's nothing in between you and the person that you're doing a transaction with. There's just a lot of people doing transactions. It's a 100% peer-to-peer decentralized system. And even if 80% of the users go away, then the 20% can still continue to function, or much lower percentages even. So I think it's a very impressive design. If it continues to function and a larger chunk of the world economy moves to bitcoins away from dollars and euros and things that personally I wouldn't trust my long-term future on either. Not really, because we're printing like there's no tomorrow, which usually means there's no tomorrow in the long term, historically. I mean, the Weimar Republic can tell you about that, and Zimbabwe and places like that.
Right.
We all know how this ends, right? When you print, like the US, when you print $90 to $100 billion a month in fiat currency, we all know how this movie ends, because we've seen it now a couple of times, right?
Yeah, we have seen that movie end in a bad way.
Yeah.
Not always, but we have seen it.
So Bitcoin, I think it has massive potential. Luckily, there's never going to be more than 21 million of the things on the planet. It's mathematically limited. But you can cut them up into thousands and 10,000. So you can still then do tiny transactions with a fraction of a Bitcoin.
Right. So the number actually doesn't matter.
No,
I had that realization a week ago. I mean, I have a mechanical engineering degree from MIT, and I just realized last week that the number doesn't matter, because it's 21 million total coins.
Something. Yeah.
And then, or that could be 210 million tenth of the coins, or it could be 2 billion 100. So it doesn't even matter.
No.
Right?
No, it doesn't matter very much. As long as you can do the transactions and you can break it down to small enough chunks to do transactions, then you're fine. there's lots of reasons for many people in the world to not trust any of these centralized institutions, whether it's a government or a transnational, ECB type institution or a bank. It turns out that all of them are incompetent and or corrupt to the core. Your mileage may vary from institution to institution, but none of them seem to really have a good grasp of what the nature of this crisis is, what caused it, can we even fix it at all, what's still possible in terms of numbers. So political systems, they keep making empty promises. Oh no, the crisis is going to end, and then you look at the numbers, there's nothing going on. All the pension promises that are being made all over the world are completely mathematically impossible in terms of required economic growth, which there are no resources to do that on this planet, so probably never going to happen. So then, why wouldn't you go to a system that probably also has risks? It's still volatile, it's not free from risk. And of course, if you have all your value now on your laptop, then don't have your laptop stolen, don't have your laptop hacked into. So it comes with a whole new set of problems. Right. It's not problem free.
Have you heard about this guy that had his bitcoins on his laptop, and he had the codes on his laptop, and they weren't worth very much, and he threw it in a landfill?
Yes.
And
he's now digging for his 7.5 million or whatever.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Yeah. Oops.
We've heard all that. All right. So you're encouraged by the potential of Bitcoin.
Absolutely.
But you're not loading all of your savings into it either.
No. But I think that something like Bitcoin, whether it's Bitcoin or a new version that will be developed when, if and when this breaks, if that happens, then somebody will fix that and fix it, maybe a few other things. And there'll be like a Bitcoin 2.0, or maybe we'll call it differently. But something like this, an electronic, crypto-based, 100% peer-to-peer, 100% decentralized global currency, I think it has a big future. So I agree with Rick Falkvinger's analysis that it is possible that a big chunk of the world economy at some point in the future will be running in Bitcoins, which, yes, mathematically means that the value of a Bitcoin can go to $100,000 per Bitcoin or more.
Right. Well, Rick's saying 2 to 5 million Bitcoin is where it starts to become a viable currency in a chunk. It is a bit. I'm a bit skeptical to think that the very first iteration is the one that's going to be with us for the next 100 years.
No. So that is.
You're not sure.
It's very well possible that somebody will find a tiny hole somewhere and then the whole thing comes apart.
Right.
But I think that is a specific crypto implementation fault, which is fixable. But I think the concept is much more powerful than any fault we can find with this specific implementation of the idea.
Right.
So I think, unless our governments and our banks really start doing things very, very differently from what they've done in the last 200 years, so we can regain some of the trust that we've lost, this is going to have a really big future.
Okay, I think that's very well said. I think the concept is something that's here to stay. Whether this version will be the one, we will see.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I used to have a trader in the city, and he would always say, Brian, if cold fusion is invented and proven tomorrow, then the value of oil will go to zero. Yeah. So he's like, I always keep everything relative in mind. Yeah. So it's like, if there's a fault in this tech, then all of that goes to zero. Yeah. So, I have people asking me, should I put all my savings in Bitcoin? And I'm like, look, treat it as another risky asset. Put 5% of your worth in it, but don't put 50, because you just don't know what can happen. But it's interesting these days. I mean, it's gone up by a lot. Yeah. And it's
the same with gold. If you look at what happened to gold over the last decade, that's been going up and down again. But if you look at the longer term, I'm not an investment expert at all, seriously, but what I'm seeing there is just the consequences of too much money printing. It's very basic, elementary school mathematics. And if you make more green papers that says $100, full faith and credit, yada, yada, but the amount of stuff on the planet doesn't increase significantly. There's no more gold or oil, or in fact, we're running out of most of those things, even things like copper ore, phosphorus, natural gas. Those two we need for fertilizer.
Right.
It's rather important for us. Feed 7 billion people. If we're running out of all of that stuff, but the only thing that increases in volume is green papers that says dollars on them or euros,
then yeah, that's not going to be worth very much.
Okay, your point is made. I think the dollar is here to stay for a while, so we'll disagree with that. I think it's going to be around, but I completely understand what you're saying about monetary policy. I want to get your thoughts really quickly on copyright. I know it's something that you do talk about.
Yep.
We had Rick here this last week. He obviously has some opinions on it as far as the Pirate Party, and I just want to get your thoughts. And I asked him a very basic question, and this might be a great way for you to explain your thoughts on it. But when you look at Hollywood's perspective, and Hollywood says, say take Grand Theft Auto 5. Have you played Grand Theft Auto?
No.
Okay,
No.
I played it
but
a little
I know
bit.
the game.
It came out, it had a big debut, it sold, Lord knows, $500 million or $1 billion worth of this software that they spent years to create. Obviously, some people paid for it, some people pirated it. What are your thoughts on the copyright industry? Should they have a copyright to it? Should it be free information? And then the final step is, should someone be prosecuted for, passing this copyrighted information back and forth?
I think a game where the development costs are high is probably one of the harder cases.
It's trickier than like a movie, isn't it?
Well, even a movie, there are significant costs. The fundamental problem, I don't think, is not whether you can recognize the fact that, here's a bunch of programmers who worked very hard for several years and made something really beautiful, and it sounds reasonable that they would be, rewarded for all that effort and creativity. That to me sounds very, very reasonable. I think the big problem is on the other side, where, and this is not something I thought of, this is actually the opinion of several law professors in Europe who are experts in copyright law. And I had conversations with them over the last 5 years, and they basically explained to me that the nature of copyright now, in the Western world certainly, but really globally, is such that the laws get written by lobbyists and experts from private companies. They get rammed through voting systems and voting procedures under the guise of trade negotiations, where most of the parliamentarians cannot even read the text they're voting for. And then once these new law frameworks are in place, there is no mechanism for elected representatives, the people who are supposed to work for me on my behalf in the political system, to then change those laws again. So the laws are not made according to normal democratic protocol of transparency and oversight and majority vote and all those nice things. And once they are locked in, they cannot change by the very mechanism that we have devised to change laws that we don't like, or where we, develop our insights and we think, oh, this needs to be tweaked a little bit. So when that is the situation with copyright law, then for me, it fundamentally becomes the question whether I should still feel morally obliged by that whole legal concept. So I decided several years ago, after having several of these conversations with these professors who explained this to me, I said, okay, from now on, I'm going to treat my respect for people's copyright on a per case basis. So I'm going to say, okay, hey, these guys, GTA, for instance, I'm not my game, but I've been playing Civilization, which is this other computer game, for 20 plus years.
Okay.
So whenever a new version comes out, I buy it. I'm very happy to drop 60 euros or whatever. And then, 5 years down the line, they make another version and it'll be beautiful. I don't have much time to play these days, but, once every 3 years, I'll give them 60 euros. I'm very happy to do that. I think that's a very fair exchange for the enjoyment I get out of such a game with friends. However, Disney's right to lock up the drawing of a mouse until 2045, I don't think that's reasonable. I don't think that serves society. And copyright needs to serve society. And if it does not, if it merely is serving a bunch of private companies, then we have a real problem. Now, that doesn't mean that, therefore, we can just violate everything all the time. But there is a big middle ground here. And so I think what particularly the music and the movie industry have done is really damaged our faith and ability to have faith in these legal systems. And this then becomes, an atmosphere in which more and more people are saying, look, if the law isn't even democratically made, then it's simply not going to apply to me.
So
right?
it's an anachronism. It's a bit outdated, you think, this whole copyright law?
Well, the way it's made is just not in tune with how it's supposed to be and what we sort of agreed on as democracies.
Yeah, I understand.
That needs to change. And I think if that changes and we get to copyright laws that are, made where the balance of society and the interest of individual parties are truly in balance. So I think, for instance, that would mean a copyright term of, say, 12 years instead of life of author plus 75, which is completely insane, with modern technology. But the original copyright term was 14 years. And that was in the 1700s when technology was moving a lot slower than today, incredibly much slower than today. So I don't know, I think 10 to 15 years, somewhere there is a reasonable copyright term for most works. I think that's probably fine. For patents, the same, 10 to 15 years. There might be certain areas where we might stretch at to 20, something like that. But locking up elements of culture or elements of science for decades or even for over a century, that doesn't serve society. Okay. So I think that needs to change. And I think if that changes, then we can seriously have the discussion again. And most people that I know who make digital copies or who download or even who upload, they don't mind supporting artists or creative people or even companies that enable creative people. But what they do mind is buying, for instance, a digital song, and then they can only play it on an Apple iPod and not on an Android phone because now it's locked with some stupid digital lock.
Yeah, no, I'm a bit selective the same way. I mean, I find like with movies, like if video on demand, like if you want me to pay for your movie, then make it easy for me and make it reasonable. Yeah. So, if it's, £4 or £7, give me the option to do it. I want to pay. I want to watch it. I love watching things in HD. The sound has to be great. I'm not going to watch something that was recorded on a digital cam in Indonesia. I want the quality. I'm willing to pay for it. But if you don't give me that option, then I feel like, okay, I'm going to go guerrilla and I'm going to go find a way to see it. So, and if it's, something, and I have a Netflix subscription, so I'm sure it's not a lot of money, but some money is trickling down to some of these artists. And so I kind of use a similar approach, whether it's right or wrong, is deciding when. I think. Like GTA, I wouldn't feel right about downloading a copy of GTA. I'm happy to pay that. I know they worked hard on it, that kind of thing. But I think people are less, when it comes to Hollywood, people are a little less sympathetic.
Absolutely.
With some of the major studios.
But I think the central thing that government should worry about is not the fact that a bunch of teenagers are downloading movies, but it's the fact that actually people who spend quite a lot of time thinking about this and really want to think about how you can be a moral person in a modern world in a democracy, like somebody like Rick, who has thought very long and very deeply about these matters, come to the honest conclusion that they are no longer morally bound by the laws of their country. That should scare the absolute bejesus out of anybody who works in government. Forget about Hollywood, forget about... Here are, citizens of your nation who are thinking about morality, who are thinking about their relationship with society, who come to the conclusion that there are now areas of law where actually the moral position is to ignore the law. That should really, really worry people. I think that's the big point that people are overlooking here.
That's a good point. I missed that point. Because the Pirate Party started, according to Rick, is because the politicians weren't addressing these issues. And so they were like, we're starting a party where we disagree with this piece that you've ignored over the time. And if you start disagreeing more and more and the politicians lose step with what's happening with the people, well, then probably the political system disappears at some point, right?
Or it's replaced by something else. Right. But yes, and I think the fact that the Pirate Party exists and is actually successful in all kinds of places itself should really, should serve as a wake-up call for the more established parties that, we missed something major here. Because, all these under 40s are voting for this new upstart party that doesn't even have a program in many other areas of policy. But apparently this one thing is so important to them that that's how they will make their choice. But again, I think the policy failure in terms of how these laws are created and how they cannot be changed because of all the big, World Intellectual Property Organization, UN, trade systems that are all sort of intertwining into each other, making it this thing where you can't move anything around anymore. I think that's the big failure, and that's the one that needs to be fixed.
Well said. Well, what's up for you next year? How much of your time is spent speaking to the public about things like you did yesterday at the Crypto Festival, and how much of your time is spent on advising, people about, IT and technology? Well, what is next for you?
Certainly since last summer, it's been IT security has been the big thing.
Is it popular now? Is there
It is. There's a lot of demand. There are lots of organizations like groups of journalists, also NGOs, particularly operating outside of sort of Western Europe, there is a lot of demand for just getting tooled up, whether it's at the individual level of a laptop or looking at the the infrastructure of an organization. So there's a lot of demand for it. There is still also, some of the other stuff we do is looking at sort of technological development, sort of 10 to 20 years out, and working with mostly big corporate clients, like financial institutions, but also maybe the hospital, sometimes government institutions, about trying to analyze, okay, what does this mean for your organizational strategy? What kind of new people do you need to get on board, and what kind of expertise do you need to develop? So there's still a fair bit of that what we're doing as well. That's actually what I started out on when I left my corporate job that I had over a decade ago. I must say that thinking and talking about the future in 2013 is not as much fun as it was in sort of 2002, when I think it was easier to be more optimistic about the future a decade ago than now. I think now a lot more of our really big problems have grown a lot bigger, basically.
Okay.
And it's both in failure of some of our democratic institutions, and this whole war on terror thing spun completely out of control. Beyond anything we would even recognize 12 years ago, I think. But also, things like resource scarcity are some of their environmental problems. If you take all of that together, it becomes this really perfect storm of, where there's a lot of stuff we can do and a lot of stuff we should be doing, and actually a lot of places where technology could help. And this is, of course, what the techno-optimists tend to say, yeah, but we can fix this by technology. And I agree with them that we can, but the problem is that we don't, right? So we spent $4 trillion invading Iraq instead of spending $4 trillion on building clean energy technology. We could have done something really cool with that kind of money, and we chose not to as a society. So I agree with the techno-optimists that technology can solve a massive range of big problems that we have. But the big problem and the big annoyance for me also is that somehow we keep choosing to not do that and do all these other really stupid, unproductive things.
So you're not as optimistic as you used to be. Well, there's a lot to talk about, that's for sure. Can you talk about some of the other work you do? Can you talk about some of the work you're doing later today as far as keeping certain things secure for certain projects and things like that?
Sure. I'm going to be working with the documentary team who are doing... we're developing a fairly hard-hitting documentary on sort of majorly important former politicians in positions of power.
Can we name it or not?
Yeah, it's the Blair. It's the Blair doc.
So this is the George Galloway crowd-funded documentary called "The Killing of Tony Blair," which alludes to the financial killing that Tony made, I think, after he left office.
Yes.
He crowd-funded this thing. We had Max Kaiser on here a couple weeks ago. He was talking about it.
Yeah.
We've had Galloway on before. We're going to have him back again probably early next year. So it's going to be a really interesting film. Obviously, it's exciting that there was a big demand for this film, and you can see it directly in crowdsourcing, right?
Yeah.
So how are you involved in the project? Because I found it really interesting when you told me why you're involved.
Right. Well, I met some of the people when I was working with the Center for Investigative Journalism before the summer, and they told me some of the stuff that they were up to, and I followed it, and I found it very, very interesting. And I discussed with them, and I said, look, if you guys want to make sure that you don't get into troubles, your production process doesn't get interfered with, or if you want to have a surprise in the media, you need to be able to keep some information away from people who might want to mess with your project. And so that's why we've already done some basic with them, but we're going to do a bit more today and just slowly tool up the core team. And of course the team is expanding, so there's more people that need to just have some tools and have some instruction and test drive it a little bit, and also learn some of the behaviors that go with this sort of work.
And your idea is to advise them to keep everything secret and private, what they're doing, so people can't monitor and see what's happening, or people they're going to contact or interview. It just keeps everything secret about the project. Yeah. This is so funny. You're almost like a security consultant for a film project. That role wouldn't have existed, say, 5 years ago, but now it's very important.
But this sort of tells you where we are, where if you want to do journalism now, then basically, if you want to do serious journalism in the Western world in 2013, basically it amounts to information guerrilla warfare against your own government. That's sort of where we are.
That's good. That's the quote of the episode. That's really well said. I mean, when it comes to Greenwald and everything he did with Snowden, I mean, if at any point that link had been exposed, then there would have been no story.
Yeah,
right? So
exactly.
It's just an essential part. We might need your services here on London Real come next year, just to keep everything locked down here. So
Well, just let me know.
I might be giving you a call, but
right.
it's just fantastic to think that after Snowden we have to think about that. But then we think what the news of the world was doing years and years and years ago, where listening to people's voicemails, and I mean, this is something we probably should have been aware of a long time ago.
Well, certainly. I mean, we knew from the report on Echelon back in 1999, of course, that this was going on. It's just that over the last decade, the technology has enabled the scale to be ramped up to something that is completely beyond belief, where literally everything that everybody does online or on their mobile phone can be monitored almost in real time. It's pretty much at that level now, where you could have somebody's entire informational life stored away somewhere in a bunker in Utah, available at the drop of the hat to anybody within an intelligence infrastructure who wants to do something with it.
Right, which could mean millions and millions of people and contractors and subcontractors.
Exactly.
Who knows?
Yeah, or infiltrated Chinese spies and who knows? This is the big problem. I mean, we now have the de facto evidence that the NSA can't keep a secret.
Right.
So aside from the fact that they're doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing, the single biggest other problem is that they're creating this giant, juicy target for other people to hack, right?
Right.
Because anybody who can get access to that pile of information, it's literally keys to the kingdom.
Right.
And obviously they can't protect it from their own contractors that they hire.
Right.
So
even if you're going into that big business meeting, the guy across the boardroom table might know everything about you via some contact in China or some
exactly.
cartel.
This is the thing. This is the thing.
Right.
So if some information trader gets in there and start, shopping some of this stuff around to whether it's big corporations or other governments, or there's, if I were Goldman Sachs, I would have long since, put a tiny, tiny bit of my money, say a couple of billion, to hiring some people on the inside at the NSA.
Right.
Because the information that they have, if you use that for trading, spending $1 billion on getting that key to that pile, that's nothing. You probably make that back on the first day.
There's a famous line in the movie Wall Street, one of my favorite movies, with Michael Douglas and Charlie Sheen. And Michael Douglas, Gordon Gekko, says to Charlie Sheen's Bud Fox, he says, "The most valuable commodity I know of is information."
Yeah.
And,
well, it's true then, it's true now.
It is. Arjen, I ask everyone who sits in this chair a few questions at the end. I'm going to ask you the same thing. If you could make a phone call to the 20-year-old Arjen and give him a little bit of advice to that young man, what would you tell him to do? Or what would you tell him?
What would I tell him?
What was he doing?
Well, I was studying back then, and I would... I think I would. Well, actually, not about the studying. That was all. That one all was okay. The bit was more about you will find some really cool people in your life. Even right now, maybe not so much. That I think is an important thing for me. Meeting somebody like Annie, that's a really big thing for me.
Okay. How long have you known Annie for?
Since 2007.
Okay.
So that's for me, that's a long time.
So I have some faith that you will meet some cool people.
You will meet some of these really, really special people, and also to tell them, go with your instincts on what you really want to do, even though it's not always the secure option, because that is how you meet these people. That and sort of the most interesting thing you will do in your life is by just taking these little risks with doing the non-conformist thing. So dare to do that. And you won't always be happy, and you certainly won't always be rich, but you'll be doing interesting stuff. And the other thing is, take care of your knees, because I now busted both, so the mountain climbing is a little bit over for me.
Okay. How'd you bust your knees?
One was I fell while climbing in Switzerland. The other was when I got hit by a car. And so now they're both, I can still walk and fine, but descending 6,000 feet with a 60-pound backpack, that's not something I can really do anymore without paying a massive pain price basically at the end of the day. So I still enjoy walking and being outside a lot, but it's not more like sort of the more fanatical stuff that I used to do.
You used to do some big climbs.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and it's the descending that's hard,
That
not
that
the
hurts.
ascending.
It's the ascending is okay. It's the descending with full gear on that really hurts.
Okay.
So walking sticks, and then you can handle it a little bit.
Okay, that's a very good answer. On that same note, to the 20-year-old listening right now, what advice do you give them? You know, whether they're, you know, they want to get into what you're doing someday. You know, whether they should need to go to school for a certain thing. Should they go and learn, you know, about technology at school? Should they go a different way? And like, what should they be doing, you know, about their own privacy? And what advice do you give them?
Well, I think they should value it. They should study it themselves and be critical of sort of, you know, commercial interests and things like that. Regrettably, don't trust the mainstream, you know, media systems, information systems, political things. But there are lots of places out there where there are people that, you know, will help you, that will put you on a path. And see what you can do to help them. You know, be a participant in the process. Don't just go to a crypto party to consume, but spend a little bit of time thinking beforehand, and particularly afterward. Okay, maybe I'm not a cryptographer, maybe I'm not an IT specialist, but what is it that I can do to help those people so that they can then, you know, help even more other people? To get involved. And again, the most interesting stuff I've done in my life is because I got involved with stuff. Not because somebody asked me or I had a mandate or I got paid for it, but just start, just begin. And so most of the interesting policy work I've done in IT, you know, was not a paid job. I just chose to start talking to some MPs. But then 5 years down the line, you're advising the Minister for Trade. And then it's a paid job. Now, that was never my motivation. But if you wait for a mandate, if you wait for somebody to, you know, then you can wait a very long time. You're probably not going to go to that very interesting place. If you just start with whatever it is that, you know, you find interesting and relevant, then you can really go places. And I would advise that. And a big corporation, by the way, as a first job, can be an excellent place to learn. So there's nothing wrong with having, you know, I had my sort of big first corporate job at IBM, and it was wonderful. There was so much to learn there. There was so much access to interesting people and interesting technologies, and there was a wonderful start. But then after a while, you know, you maybe want to do something else than essentially selling products, you know, to big banks or whatever. So it's a really good place to start, but I don't think it's a place where you want to spend the rest of your life. And it's making the switch in time. I think that's important.
Very well said. That's really good advice. You know, we have this parallel show here called Silicon Reel, which is one that's just dedicated to the London technology startup, you know, industry. And I see a lot of kids graduating school, and they want to be in a startup. They want to start their company. And you know, I do think there is some value to going to work for one of these big corporations. Or I went straight into Wall Street and worked for a bank when I was out of school. And I do think you can learn some stuff about, like, you know, basic things, like you have to come to work every day. You have to show up. You have to do things you don't want to do. You have to understand how an organization works, and I think there is some value there.
Absolutely.
As long as you know what you're getting into.
Yeah. Also, if you're going to be like me, if you're going to be advising later big companies, I don't think you can do that if you haven't been part of such a system, and therefore understand also, you know, the manager who might be your client has to work within limitations. You can only understand those limitations if you've been on the inside of such a big system yourself for a bit. So to really understand how things in a 100,000 person company work differently than at a startup, and not necessarily better or worse, just differently. And you have to understand the difference to be effective.
Very good advice. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it. We're big fans of Annie Michon, who recommended you for this and was our guest many months ago. If you want to check her episode, I think it's called Whistleblower. Yeah. She's just fantastic. Everyone really liked her. Great energy, great ideas. And so thanks. Please send her my regards.
I will.
And thank you for coming on. If people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way? And to find out more about Gendo, tell me.
Oh, just the easy way is to just take my name, type it into the search engine of Flavor, and my blog and my Twitter stream and my stuff will come up. Quite possibly this YouTube video at some point when it gets online.
What's your Twitter address? Is it your full name?
It's just my name. Okay. It's just my full name.
Okay.
So just search for that, and if you just search for my name, then my blog comes up, which is both in Dutch. Especially previously, I did a lot of writing in Dutch. Now it's mostly English. So my blog is bilingual. It's in English and in Dutch.
I like that. Nice. I was checking that out.
And so, yeah, everybody who's not a Dutch speaker, which is most of everybody, then just read the English stuff. And if people have questions or, want to do something, just, get in touch, let me know.
Do you have any other crypto parties planned for London? Because I promise, and I'm saying this right now, I will come to your next one.
Okay, I'm not specifically planning one, but I think the London Hackerspace is going to be doing something in the next 2 to 3 months.
Okay.
Pretty much for sure. And I spoke to some of the people at Goldsmiths yesterday, and they were very enthused by all the fact that 500 people showed up on a Saturday to do this stuff. Wonderful turnout, especially on a zero budget. So I also said to them, whatever, we need to do this again and soon. So certainly early next year, there's going to be some place in London, possibly even several places where this can be done. But I'll be happy to send you that information so you can spread it around.
Yeah, please do. And if people just want to do the basics, like find out about PGP email, the Tor browser, all that stuff, is that something they can find on your blog or?
I have a page on which I'm happy to send to people. If you go on my blog, there's a post about my session that I did with the Center for Investigative Journalism, and there are a couple of links in there that people can click on, where basically you get a little rundown of all the basic tools and where you can download them and all that stuff. And the post also has a video of the workshop I did, which is basically a 1-hour primer on the basic concept and some of the basic tools and what they're good for, what they're not good for, and how to use them. Excellent. So I think if people just go to my blog and have a look, they can find all the basic stuff to get going. But I really, if you're not familiar with the technology, really go find some people and have it explained to you and just test drive it a bit with them, with somebody next to you. That's always the best way. And then figure out a way to give back to that community. That's the other half.
Yeah, that's well said. That's something you keep hitting at, is it don't just go and take, go and give a little bit and give your time. So very important. Awesome. If you're listening to us on iTunes, you can come see our beautiful faces on YouTube. Arjen's dressed in black like Johnny Cash. It's a good look. And you can find us there. We're on Twitter at London Real TV, Facebook, all the good stuff. If you want to get involved and help us out, just send me a message. That's Brian at londonreal.tv. And as we say, it's about the journey. Thanks so much for coming on. I hope we see you again soon, and all the best.
All right. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care. This week on London Real, former MI5 intelligence officer turned whistleblower, Annie Machon.
What we're looking at now is a de facto police state. All the laws are in place, they're just not being applied to most citizens yet. I think it's not a case of having anything to hide, it's having a case that I have a right to privacy, and I can't guarantee my government will uphold that right, therefore I need to take the steps to do it.
She talks NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden.
He would die for his country. He wants to try and improve the way his country operates within its own boundaries and protect its citizens. And we seem to forget and think that human rights are a luxury. They're not, they're fundamental, and privacy is one of them.
On Sunday, London Real presents Annie Machon, whistleblower.
So it's a very British mess, is the short answer.